So I want to welcome everybody here and thank you for joining us today. Pleased to have David Stearman here. I'm Karen Long. I'm the founder of Streamline Government Contracts. We host Contractor Chat, which was started by Susan Henson. And Streamline Government Contracts, what we do is we reduce risks and increase profits. How we do that is we reduce risks by helping negotiate teaming agreements, subcontracts, and also helping with compliance. We increase profits by helping you look ahead and tracking your projects and trying to find ways that from a contractual point of view, you may be able to increase profits. So one of the things we do is estimates at completion. So again, welcome and thanks for being here. And I'm going to go ahead and let Lindsay introduce herself and our guest speaker here.
Thank you, Karen. My name is Lindsay Riegelsberger. I am the Office Manager and Marketing Specialist for Streamline Government Contracts. I'm here to support Karen and our guest speaker, David, and you guys. So without further ado, I will introduce David. David Stearman has been supporting government contractors in their proposal development efforts for more than 23 years. His company, Proposal Strategy and Development Consulting LLC, provides some full spectrum proposal support to small and mid-sized GovCons, including direct support, staff augmentation, training, coaching, and mentoring, as well as consulting services. So I will turn it over to David Stearman.
Okay, thank you. The topic is choosing and using the right vehicle. And this is really important. It's an element of business strategy for any government contractor. And it's often underappreciated and underaddressed. And that's why I really wanted to address it today. All right, let me. Okay, so why does this? What is a vehicle? We're going to start with a little definition. What are we talking about when we're talking about a vehicle? So a vehicle it's basically just a mechanism that the government uses to procure goods or services. That's really it's a jargon term that's used in the GovCon business. That's all it is. It's just a way to get to buy stuff. And there are a number of different examples of contract vehicles. You may have heard of these government-wide acquisition contracts, GWACs, MATOCs and MADOCs, IDIQs, BPAs and BOAs. The GSA schedules are a type of vehicle, and the 8A program, also a type of vehicle. They each have their own little wrinkles and differences, but they all share the same commonality of their ways that government agencies buy products and services, and they are also used as kind of pre-screening devices, so that when they are buying a product or service, instead of putting out an RFP to the entire universe and then having to evaluate 12,000 proposals, they do a pre-screening kind of thing with the vehicle where they winnow it down, so to speak, to a manageable number of companies that can provide the types of product or service that they're buying on that vehicle. So that's really what we're talking about. For today's conversation, I'm really focusing on the multiple award vehicles, the GWACs, the MATOCs, the multiple award IDIQs. There are single award IDIQs and there are single award BPAs. But this conversation is really focused on the multiple awards, because there you get on the vehicle and then you're competing for work once you're on the vehicle. And that's really the focus today. So why does this matter? The short story is you need a strategy for vehicles just as much as you need a marketing strategy, a pricing strategy, a this, that, or the other thing strategy. There are a million different strategies that businesses have to have in order to succeed. And a vehicle strategy is an important one for government contractors. And as I said, it's a strategy that's often not even thought about, or if it is thought about, it's not thought about deeply. And that's where I hope I can help today. So, you know, you have to get to the right vehicle for the right reasons. That's just foundational. It's easy to go after the wrong things, or it's easy to go after the right thing, but for the wrong reasons. You know, you need to be really strategic about it. And you need to have a plan for using the vehicle, because getting on a vehicle is not the goal. The goal is to use the vehicle to drive revenue and growth for your company. And so that is why you need to have a strategy, not only for choosing the vehicle and getting on the vehicle, but for how you're going to use the vehicle to generate revenue and growth. All right. So I'm a big believer in Stephen Covey. One of his 7 principles is begin with the end in mind. So that's where I'm going to start. Even though the title of this presentation is choosing and using, I'm starting with the using part because it's by far the more important part, right? If you can't use the vehicle effectively, and it doesn't matter how your choosing is going. So how are you going to use the vehicle to generate revenue and growth is the key question you need to answer for yourself. So there's a dirty little secret about vehicles like this, all the GWACs, the IDIQs, et cetera, et cetera. The dirty little secret that people often don't tell you is that the way to make money is not to win task orders. What? I know, kind of mind-blowing, but it's true. You're thinking, well, how do I make money if I'm not winning task orders? Well, the way to make money is not to win task orders. The way to make money is to create task orders. Because even once you're down selected to be on the vehicle, you are still competing against a bunch of other companies that have the same capabilities that you have, same experience, similar past performance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it's still a competitive marketplace. The way to succeed on a contract vehicle like these is to bring work to the customers and to the vehicle so that you are positioning yourself ahead of time from the beginning to be the one that wins that task order. So you're driving work to the vehicle, which is a little ironic, I recognize, because we're talking about getting on a vehicle. And if you think of this as, you know, a seat on the bus, somebody else is usually driving the bus. But in this case, you need to drive work to the vehicle rather than letting the vehicle drive you to wherever it's going to. That passive approach is not going to work. So this is the key. If you take nothing away from today's session, take this away. You need to drive work to the vehicle. That's how you're going to succeed. And that's why you need to think about your strategy for doing that before you even think about what vehicle you're going to go after. So how do you do that? So as I mentioned, it's the most important part of your vehicle strategy. You really should not pursue a vehicle until you have this piece in place. I really recommend that you not just chase after vehicles to get on the vehicles and plan to figure it out later. Figure this part out first, and that'll also help you make good decisions about which vehicles you're pursuing. So how will you do that? All right, part one, and it's not necessarily sequential, but I've just organized it because there are multiple slides here in terms of, you know, how you drive work to a vehicle. So the first thing is you need to identify customers who already use that vehicle to procure goods and services, and ideally the goods and services or goods or services that you provide. So if there are customers who are already using the vehicle, you need to identify who they are. Or if there are customers who could use that vehicle but maybe aren't yet, you need to identify who those customers are. So the first thing is identify the potential customers for that vehicle. So do you work with them now? Do you want to work with them going forward? Those are two key questions to ask yourself. Next, you need to identify the types of goods or services that these customers procure through that vehicle. Obvious question, do you provide those goods or services? right? It's hard to drive work to a vehicle if it's being used to procure goods or services that you don't provide. And then also, are there other companies that you could team with in a partnership, in a JV, in a CTA that provide those kinds of goods or services? So you need to, you're getting ducks in a row is really what it comes down to. All right, next, you need to identify what customers want and need that they are not currently getting. In government contracting, the focus always needs to be on what matters to the customer first, before you start talking about what you can do. You first need to identify what matters to the customer. And the mantra I use with my clients is, it doesn't matter if you make the world's best widget if the customer is buying bananas. So you need to figure out what the customers are buying. What are they using this vehicle for? Then you can start thinking about how you and or your teaming partners can meet those needs. And then you need to start talking to the customer. And this is not a one-time thing. It's a process that needs to happen over time. You need to establish a relationship, build the relationship, nurture the relationship. You're not going to succeed if you don't have the strong customer relationships and the strong customer understanding and knowledge. That's a key to success in government contracting in general, and in particular on vehicles like the ones we're talking about today. You really need to invest the time. This is not a quick process. If you think you're going to just respond to an RFP, get on the vehicle and start making money right away, it's not going to happen that way. You really need to plan for not just months, but really years to position yourself to get onto the vehicle and to succeed using the vehicle. So build that into your strategy. This is not a 3-week process. It's not a 3-month process. It's more likely to be a 3-year process. And you need to be serious about investing that time and the associated resources, including money, to make that work for you. Keep at it. One strategy that you can do once you've established a relationship with the customers that use that vehicle, submit a white paper. Explain something that could be helpful to them. Maybe something they don't know, something they haven't thought about, a solution that's out there that might help them address the problems they're having or the challenges they're experiencing. White papers are very effective as kind of initial steps before you get to a proposal. You can introduce yourself and your company, and you can also be of service to that customer, right? It's not about what you're going to get from them. It's what you can offer to them. How can you be of service to them? So a white paper is a good place to start in that regard. You also want to help both the customer, the programmatic customer, and the contracting officer shape the requirement. This is an important part of driving work to the vehicle, is you want to be the one that is literally driving. You want to be in the driver's seat. You want to be telling them what the requirements ought to be, and what specific technical capabilities should be part of this, and what specific types of key personnel might be needed, and what kind of past performance, and et cetera, et cetera. But the best way to win a proposal is to shape it. The more effectively you can shape what the requirements are, the more likely you are to win the work. It's not a guarantee, but it's essential. And it will occasionally directly lead to an award, because if you shape it really, really well, and the customer really likes what you're offering, the advice you're offering them, the suggestions you're offering them for how to shape the RFP, it might turn into a sole source, potentially. Now, that's rare, and you certainly shouldn't count on that. But the point is that that's like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that we usually never get to, but we can occasionally, but it really does require shaping. Help them write the RFP, essentially. And by doing that, you are positioning yourself to be the best company to respond to that RFP. Because, oh, by the way, all the suggestions you're making are things that you have the capability to do. You are the only ones with that particular certification, et cetera, et cetera. Shaping is so important. And it's a key element of driving work to the vehicle. Because there's no point in driving work to the vehicle if you're not also shaping it, because then again, you're still going to be one of the crowd. Again, continue to nurture that relationship over time. Don't try to rush things. The customer is going to work on their timeline, not yours. Work with them. Don't try to push them. Don't try to pull them. Walk beside them. Think of it as literally like a hike in the woods where you're walking side by side with your friend and enjoying the scenery and et cetera, et cetera. You're not pushing them down the path. They're not pulling you down the path. You're walking together. That's the kind of relationship you want to have with the customers as you're driving work to the vehicle. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Keep at it. It's not going to happen overnight, but keep at it. As you're doing that, as things become to get more in focus and it's getting closer to where the customer is going to be ready to do an actual solicitation or even an RFI, you want to start building your capture strategy at that same time. So that's going to work in tandem. As you're driving the work to the vehicle and shaping the requirement, you're going to develop your capture strategy and everything that entails. That includes your teaming strategy, your pricing strategy, your technical strategy, your win strategy, all of that, that's part of your capture strategy. That's something that you're doing in parallel as you're driving work to the vehicle. All these things are part of that. You're refining your solution, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And then at the end of this process, and again, it's going to take a time. It's going to take years, usually. There will be an RFP, and you will have positioned yourself to propose and win against that RFP. And that is the whole point of being on the vehicle, is you want to position yourself to win. And that's why it's so important to drive the work to the vehicle rather than just passively waiting for task order RFPs to drop into your lap. Because I guarantee you, for every single one of those task orders, somebody else has shaped that RFP. And so if it wasn't you, you're probably not going to win. That's just the reality. So with all of that said, the next question is, which vehicles are right for you? Well, the answer or answers to that question actually are found in what we just talked about, right? Because once you've developed your strategy for using the vehicle, that's going to lead very naturally to figuring out which vehicle or vehicles are the right ones for you. So first and foremost, you have to have the clear strategy for using the vehicle. I know I keep saying this over and over again, but this is the most important thing. So you also have to validate that you qualify for that vehicle. Obviously, certain vehicles have certain areas that they're the services or goods that they're procuring. For example, you think of vehicles like CISP4, the infamous CISP4, it's a health IT vehicle, right? So the purpose of that vehicle is to procure health IT services. So if you are not an IT service provider at all, that's not going to be a good vehicle for you. If you're an IT service provider, but you're not in the health space, it's probably not an ideal vehicle for you. So you need to be clear about what kinds of goods and services they're procuring, and do you qualify at a fundamental level to provide those kinds of things. Also, the other element of qualification is, if it's a small business vehicle, like it's set aside for women-owned small businesses or service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses, and you're not in that category, obviously, you're not going to qualify for that vehicle. So you need to understand all those different aspects of who's going to be on the vehicle. Then you need to validate that the scope matches what you do. That's pretty fundamental. You need to then identify current customers who already use the vehicle or could, because this is about meeting customers where they are. So if you have current customers that are using that vehicle, that's an indicator that it might be a good vehicle for you to get on if you're not already on it, because your customers are there. You want to be where your customers are. You want to be where customers that you'd like to have are. You want to meet them where they are. And part of the reason for that is using the contract vehicles like GWACs and IDIQs and so forth has advantages for the customers as well. It eases their administrative burden because it means that they don't have to do all the procurement and contract administration themselves. The contracting shop that runs the vehicle does that for them. So for example, for CIO-SP4, NITAC is the contracting shop that runs that vehicle. Even agencies that are not within HHS can use that vehicle, and they can use NITAC to administer the RFP and the evaluation process and the award process. And then also NITAC will be the administrative contracting office where they will do the contract management from the government side. And so that's an advantage for the agencies that maybe don't have robust or mature contracting shops themselves. They can utilize these vehicles for that. So that's why they want to get onto the vehicle. It's kind of a no muss, no fuss for them. And that's why you want to make sure you're meeting them where they are, because it makes their life easier to work with you. It's all about making the customer's life easier, better. So you also want to identify any customers that you currently work with but aren't on the vehicle yet, because then you can also encourage them to consider using that vehicle, and you can explain why it's in their interest to do so. You want to identify those potential new customers who are already on the vehicle, but you're not working with them yet, right? So if you've been thinking about moving into a slightly different market, if you're already in the HHS space, so CISP4 would be a good vehicle for that, great. But also think about how the VA might procure health IT services. And if that's a market you want to get into, if you've decided you want to get into the VA space, then you want to identify those customers within the VA space and start to engage with them about the possibility of using that vehicle to procure the health IT services that they need. And then, as again, a lot of this is repetitious, but it all fits together as part of, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, it all fits together. You want to identify the companies that you work with that have access to the vehicle, particularly if you're a small business and you're subbing to larger primes. You know, some of these vehicles they're already on, and that's where you're getting work because they're on the vehicle and something comes out on that vehicle that you have the capabilities to do, and you become a subcontractor to them for that particular task order. So you want to identify who those companies are that you can team with if you're not already teamed with them. Even if you're already teamed with companies, you want to engage with them to effectively become part of their team. One of the things that often happens with large teams where there's a large prime and a bunch of small business primes because the prime need a bunch of small business subs rather, because the prime needs to meet certain small business requirements that are written into the contract. You know, they need so many % of small business subcontracts and so many % of woman-owned and veteran-owned and yada, yada, yada. So they have small business requirements they're trying to meet. And so they tend to build teams that have a lot of small businesses on them. But that doesn't mean, even if you're on the team that's already on the vehicle, that you're going to get work, because you still need to bring work to the vehicle. The best way you can ensure that you will be a useful subcontractor to them is by bringing work to the vehicle. So you need to figure that part out as well. And you want to be their go-to sub. If you're in that position, you want to be the one who's constantly bringing work to the vehicle, and that brings revenue to the prime. Even if it's little more than pass-through revenue, it's still bringing value to the prime. So you want to make sure you have identified potential primes and work with them and work with the customers. It all fits together. So what's your plan for getting on the vehicle? And this is this next part is really primarily from the point of view of being a prime on the vehicle. So, you know, there are many small businesses that start out as subs, and then when they're ready to step out on their own, so to speak, they're often kind of overwhelmed by the prospect of, how do I do this? How do I become a prime on something where I've been only been a sub before? So that's what this next set of slides is really about. It's about, how do you become a prime on a vehicle? So validate that you have the right resources. And this is really not just about the technical resources, but about the resources to engage in the acquisition process. It's long, it's complicated, it's way more complex than being a sub. It's way more complicated than being a small business in a small business set aside arena where you're only bidding against other small businesses. You need to really think about, what resources do you need to win? Do you have a robust proposal capability or function within your company? Or if you don't have it organically, can you buy it on the market, right? There are plenty of consultants like me that provide proposal support. And so those resources available to you, but you need to make decisions about, what are the resources you have, what are the resources you need, and if you have a gap, how are you going to address that gap? Similarly, in terms of expertise, time is a big issue too. For a lot of small businesses in particular, it may be the most challenging issue, because there just aren't enough person hours in the day to run the business, execute the contracts you have, and pursue new contracts. It's a lot. And it's easy or it's tempting to dump a lot of proposal work onto your existing staff, but they don't have the expertise to write proposals necessarily. They may have technical expertise, but they're not good writers or whatever. But they also just don't have the bandwidth. They're tapped out. So you have to think about that. Do we have the time? If we don't have the time, you know, how do we get it? And money is the other big thing. None of this comes without cost. But I encourage my clients to think about this less in terms of a cost or expense and more in terms of an investment, right? You've got to spend money to make money, that thing. It's important to be willing to invest the time and resources and money in order to succeed in government contracting, particularly as a small business. It's scary. You don't have the same kind of cash reserves that Lockheed Martin does. Nobody does. But you still need to kind of figure it out and make it work for you. So that's a key consideration right up front. Obviously, as I said repeatedly, you need to understand how the vehicle works, who uses it, how they use it, what those customers want, and the key factors that will determine whether you're going to win a spot on that vehicle or not, right? So you need to understand, how are they going to evaluate when they get to the point of an RFP? How are they going to evaluate the offers? And there is a whole range of possibilities there. Lately, we're seeing a lot of what's called scorecard RFPs, like CISP4, Polaris, you name it, where essentially they're saying, here's a list of criteria that we are interested in. If you have certain types of qualifications in these criteria, we're going to give you X number of points. At the end of it all, we're going to add up all of your points and see how your points stack up against the points of the other offers. And we're going to take the top 20 or top however many, or we're going to take everybody above the 75% or 95% threshold of points. But you need to understand what that process is going to look like so you can strategize about how you can position yourselves to get onto this vehicle. You also, I can't say this often enough or firmly enough, you need to start way in advance. You do not wait for an RFP. There's an old saying in this business that if you don't know who the winner is when the RFP comes out, it's probably not you. What that means is all the work you do before the RFP is really what's going to determine your chances of winning, right? The RFP is just a document that explains what you have to offer, and you want to do the best possible job you can with that proposal, but that proposal is not what's going to win or lose for you. It's what's in your offer. What's your solution? What's your value? What's your price? All of that stuff, right? Who are your key personnel? All of those elements of your proposal description are actually elements of an offer that is really what wins or loses. So you need to really figure out what that's going to look like and spend the time in advance of the RFP to figure that out. The Army has a saying, prior planning prevents poor performance. It applies in proposals as well. You need to develop a strategy for winning. You've got the strategy for using the vehicle. Now you need a strategy for winning the vehicle. What is the solution you need to offer to get on that vehicle? What are the key strengths and discriminators of what you have to offer that will set you apart from and above other offers who might be going after the same thing? What is the teaming strategy that you're going to bring to bear to position yourselves to get onto this vehicle? What's your pricing strategy going to be? Are you going to price it very aggressively and be a low price bidder? That's one strategy. Works for some companies, doesn't work for others, but it is a strategy, but it's not the only strategy. You may want to have a strategy that leads to a slightly higher price offering, but also gives you more flexibility in execution. So you need to think about all those things that are part of the pricing strategy. And you need to identify who your key personnel are going to be that the customer is going to want to see, and which past performance examples you're going to cite that will impress them the most, et cetera, et cetera. All part of the strategy for winning. So all of that, all these bullet points and more. This is not intended to be an exhaustive list. It's really a representative list. But those are all part of the strategy. So there's some additional considerations for all of this. You need to be intentional and deliberate. And what I mean by that is don't run around willy-nilly. Don't chase everything that moves. Don't do it haphazardly. Don't make hasty decisions about what vehicle you're going to pursue or how you're going to do it, or etc. Really be mindful and intentional about it. That's the best way to position yourself to succeed. Mindful and intentional and deliberate. Don't try to rush it. Also, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. And what I mean by that is you can, there may be 20 vehicles out there that you think might be good vehicles for you to be on. Particularly for a small business, it is unlikely to be a good strategy to try and chase all 20. Because you're not going to be able to effectively use all 20. You just don't have the bandwidth, the resources, the time, the money, etc. All those things I mentioned earlier, right? You're going to spread yourself too thin. And you're going to spread your people too thin. And you're going to spread your B&P budget too thin. So too much of a good thing is too much. Be focused. Once you win a seat, as I said, you have to keep working the vehicle constantly, continuously, proactively, bringing work to the vehicle. Passivity is not a recipe for success on a vehicle like this. And I get that, particularly for small businesses, it can be hard to have this on your plate in addition to the existing work that you have with existing customers and everything you're doing to try and run the business and make it a success and all the other things that are involved. This is extra. But waiting for things to drop out of the sky is just not a good strategy. You really need to be involved continuously and engaged and proactive. And you need to also continuously assess whether it's working for you. And this is a really underappreciated aspect of a vehicle strategy. People get on vehicles and then they may win occasionally, or maybe they never win, and they're not really paying attention to how well it's working for them. That's really important because, again, too much of a good thing is too much. And so if you've got a vehicle that you're on but is not working for you, is not generating any revenue, and is taking up too much of your time while generating no revenue, then you have to face the possible decision that this is just not a vehicle you want to continue playing with, right? So even if you're already on it, if it's you've been 2 or 3 years on it and not won any work, you may decide, you know what, this just isn't working for us. We're going to turn our attention elsewhere. That's okay. It's okay to admit that this was not the right vehicle for you, or to admit that maybe you're not really in a position to utilize this vehicle as effectively as you'd like. That's okay. You know, this is part of being in business, is making the smartest decisions you can with the information you have and executing as best you can and assessing on a continuous basis how well things are working and being willing to change course as necessary. So, any questions? Karen or Lindsay, do we have any questions in the chat, or does anybody want to shout out questions?
Thank you so much. I've got a few questions, if that's okay. I mean, great content you've covered. Regarding the vehicles, one of the biggest challenges, and I know that you mentioned about the scorecard being there, especially for the Polaris that came out just now. One of the challenges is the facility clearance. Now, if you look at the scorecard, the numbers given to that facility clearance is astronomical. Now, facility clearance is one of those beasts. You can't get a facility clearance unless you've been sponsored to one, and you have to have people staffed, cleared on a cleared contract to be able to go after that facility clearance. What's the best way that you've seen companies achieving that facility clearance?
So that's not my particular area of expertise, but what I would say is if you start by subbing on a contract that requires personnel clearances, then you might be able to work with your prime and your prime's customer to get sponsored for a facility clearance. So that, just off the top of my head, that would be a first step that I would look at.
Okay, thank you.
Did you-
Mirza? Sorry. I'll just add, this isn't my subject matter expertise either, but we are having Squadron Defense coming in September to give to contractor chat. So you might want to consider coming to that session as well.
That would be very beneficial. If you, will that information be sent out to this group right here?
I'm not sure where we are with posting it. We're in the process of posting it, but you would register on Meetup just like you did for this one. We're just got a few more details as of the other day. So so you can look for it on Contractor Chat.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and just to piggyback on that, it will, if you join the group Loudon Contractor Chat, which you probably already are if you're on this, then it will show an announcement when there's new events posted as well. But yes, it will be posted there.
Thank you.
Did you mentioned you had a few questions? I'm happy to.
Yeah, so we are a small business, woman-owned small business. We are 8A certified. We are on GSA schedule and eBuy. We've got a couple of, actually a few subcontracts. We've never had a prime contract, but our challenge is actually reaching out to these small businesses, and we like responding from the RFI point of view, so that when an RFI is issued, we kind of get right in from the beginning and create those set asides, and then qualify us, and then educate the customer on what should be on the RFP when it does come out. But a lot of these opportunities don't come out with an RFI. They straight out come up with RFPs at times, and some of which we feel that they're already slated for somebody because of the timeline that's been given. You know, your RFP is due in next 7 days or next 4 days. I mean, it's literally impossible to read the RFP to the dot and be able to respond to those. So how do you what's your take on, in terms of when you're writing proposals, when you're looking for RFPs, RFQs, to actually not look at those that, you know, kind of have very shorter timelines, and then concentrate on the ones that you can really read up and respond properly? I mean.
Yep, got it. So short answer is, I'm going to tell you something that you're probably not going to want to hear. If you are responding to an RFP that you have no other information about before the RFP came out, don't. It's just that simple. Whether it's wired for another company or not, you are already behind the curve for other companies that have been working with that customer to shape the opportunity, that have been engaged with the customer to figure out what matters to that customer, et cetera, et cetera. All the things that I've mentioned in this chat they're important because it keeps you from this place of being reactive. It's more important to be proactive. And that is why you want to drive work to the vehicle rather than, you know, passively waiting for an RFP to come out. Honestly, your chances of winning in that situation are minuscule. And you'd spend a lot of time, money, and effort, and it would just be wasted, and it kills morale internally. It's not a good strategy, to be honest with you. So you need to start figuring out how to drive work to that vehicle. All right. And as I said, it's going to take time, and that can be daunting because you're in the position of wanting to generate revenue now. And I get that. So that's where, if you are subbing to somebody else on a vehicle, you may be able to win work in that position. Although again, the more you can drive work to that vehicle, the more successful you're going to be. But you know, whether it's through a vehicle or a standalone contract, the best way to increase your chances of success is to be proactive, to get in there well in advance of when an RFP or RFQ is going to come out. Start working with the customer, developing a relationship with the customer, listening to the customer, finding out what matters to the customer. Notice I'm using the word customer over and over again because it's all about the customer. I know from your perspective, it's about you. I get it. But what we do is all about the customer, right? Being of service to our government customers. So that's really the answer to that, is to kind of, I'm kind of rejecting the premise of your question, essentially, by telling you, you need to come up with a very different approach to this whole process. Does that make sense?
It does. And so what you're saying, even if there's an opportunity that comes out of small opportunity that 100% that you can perform, and you have the capability, past performance in it, do not respond to that?
It's not an absolute no, but in general, I'm going to say that's only one piece of the puzzle. Think about, remember Venn diagrams from middle school, right? The overlapping circles. So think about a Venn diagram with 3 circles. One circle is, can you do it? And what you were just talking about is the can you do it part. You have all the capabilities, you have all the past experience, past performance, all the right people. Great, you can do the work. Good. The second circle is, can you win it? And that's really a question of, do you have the customer knowledge? Do you have the resources to go after this? Do you have the right pricing strategy, et cetera, et cetera? Do you have a way to win it, realistically, feasibly win it? And the third circle is, can you make money doing it, right? So, maybe you have the capabilities, maybe you think you can win it, but in order to win it, you have to price it so low that you can't make any money. So you want to focus on the things that are in the center of that Venn diagram, where all 3 circles interact. Where only 2 of the circles interact, I wouldn't say that's an absolute stop sign, but it's the yellow light. And by the way, the yellow light has been on for a while. It's not like, you're going to gun it to get through the intersection, right? It's usually a very rare case where only 2 of those 3 factors make it reasonable to pursue that opportunity. Obviously, if there's only one of those 3 factors, it's really not a good opportunity. And if none of those factors apply, what are you even talking about, right? So try to focus on the opportunities where you have all 3 of those things overlapping. You can do it, you can win it, and you can make money.
Understood.
Does that help?
Yep, it does.
Okay. Were there any other questions? I know we're running, we have about 5 minutes left, but any other questions?
I have a question. So I'm just curious, David, do you think this was what I thought, but again, this is your subject matter expertise and not mine. So do government agencies use vehicles intentionally to also try to limit the competition?
In some cases, yes. Although just because of the way government contracting is structured and the fact that everybody still has to obey the FAR, it's a little tricky to do that. Where that intent to restrict competition really comes into play is where they write requirements that are so obviously tailored to a specific company. And we were just talking about things that are just wired for that company. And so often it's an incumbent, but not always. Sometimes it's wired for somebody else who's not an incumbent. But that's really the harbinger of something where even if other factors suggest it might be worth going after, that alone might suggest not so much. Also, that doesn't show up typically at the GWAC or IDIQ level so much. That'll show up at the task order level. And so you might see many task orders that are perfectly reasonable. Hopefully you've generated some of them yourself. But a lot of task orders are not geared toward limiting, really restricting the competition. But occasionally you'll see one where they require a certain tool, and only one company has that tool. Well, guess what, right? Or the key personnel have to have a certain certification that, oh, by the way, only the key personnel for the current incumbent have that certification, nobody else has it. You saw that a little bit with the ill-fated JEDI acquisition, where the Defense Department really was trying to weed out Oracle entirely. And that's why Oracle kept suing them. because they felt they were being unfairly eliminated. But they were trying to eliminate Oracle for sure. They really wanted it to be between Amazon and Google. So that's an example of that at a higher level, but it's typically, I don't see that as much at the vehicle level as we see it at the task order level or the standalone contract level.
Well, thank you so much, David, and for being here and presenting. That was very informative, very insightful. So appreciate that. And please take down David's information in case you want to reach out to him, either now or in the future for support. That would be great. I also want to let you know, contractor chat, we are going to take a break in August due to vacations. So many Washingtonians, particularly, I know we have a national audience here, but particularly Washingtonians tend to take a lot of vacation in August. But in September, as mentioned, we have Squadron Defense. And then also in October, we have the Gauge report that will be out, and Uninet presents that. So I think those will be really helpful. As you know, it's always the third Wednesday of the month from 12 to 1. If you're registered, as Lindsay said, you'll get announcements. So we'd love to have you join us again. We will be sending this video out via to all those who are registered, so you can listen again. We'll also be posting it on LinkedIn as well. So I appreciate everybody being here.
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry. My last question is, what's your
sorry, Mirza. I thought you were done. I apologize.
Yeah. What's your opinion on Gov2Win? I know that's expensive, could be expensive for small businesses, but it does give you insight as to, you know, ahead time on some of the RFPs. GovTribe is a little bit less expensive, but is that something that you do recommend if you're trying to win new business for agencies that you haven't worked for?
Yeah, those things can be helpful, but I don't recommend them as a core element of your business development strategy. And the reason is essentially what those providers are doing is they are scrubbing public-facing websites. And so you're typically not getting a lot of actual insight. What you're getting is, oh, I found this on some government website, and so I'm going to, you know, send out an email that says, here's what I found on this government website. And so it's not necessarily the core part of your business development strategy. It can be a useful supplement, but you do have to kind of weigh the cost benefit of, is the investment in this service worth the bang for the buck? And I really can't make that judgment for you. You have to make that judgment for yourself. But I also, you know, there are other folks out there that do various types of market research in the GovCon space. I'm happy to refer you to people who do that, who are probably, they're not like the big dog, like some of the ones you mentioned, but they're probably more accessible in terms of cost, and they're really sharp. I like what they do. The other thing to consider is, you know, creating a kind of dedicated BD resource, either organically within the company or by a consultant. And so, for example, if you are interested in working in a specific agency, like, I don't know, DHS, I know a very good consultant who has been working in the DHS space for decades. She knows everybody in that space, and she'd be a great resource for you to be kind of your outsourced BD department, so to speak. So if that's something that's of interest, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to make a referral.
Thank you so much. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So we are now at 1 o'clock. So again, thank you all for being here. Thanks to David for, again, an excellent presentation. If you want proposal support, please feel free to reach out to him. If after a contract award or in process of, you know, deciding about, I shouldn't say deciding, about submitting a proposal, you can, and negotiating teaming agreements and subcontracts, please feel free to reach out to me. Happy to talk with you for, half an hour, and happy to answer whatever questions I can. Again, we are contract experts, not proposal or business and development experts. So at any rate, have a great day, and thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.